Israel strikes Syria. Gaza in flames. UN outraged mobilization of Haredim in question. Tensions are once again rising in the Middle East, and this time the focus is on Israel and its immediate neighbors. What has happened in recent days is already being called one of the most serious escalations in recent months. And it's not just about the Gaza Strip, where the city has been officially declared a combat zone with no humanitarian pauses. Syria has entered the game, and the strikes on its territory make it clear. Israel is acting tougher, paying no attention either to international reactions or to criticism inside its own country. You've probably seen the headlines in the media. Israeli aircraft attacked several targets near Damascus at night. At the same time, a ground raid by special forces took place, targeting commanders of pro-Iranian formations. These people are directly linked to the supply of weapons to Lebanon and the Gaza Strip. In Israel's logic, this was a strike at the nerve centers, those who provide their enemies with money, drones, and rockets. But while in the Syrian direction, everything looked like a military success, in Gaza, the situation turned into a humanitarian nightmare. The Israeli army officially declared Gaza is a combat zone. This means that any pauses for the delivery of food, water, or medicine have been cancelled. For civilians, this is a catastrophe. People are literally trapped in a city where hospitals are not functioning, where there are interruptions in electricity and drinking water, and where any attempt to leave may end in tragedy.
It is here, in Gaza, that the key dilemma becomes clear. Israel is achieving its military objectives, but the harsher its actions, the stronger the criticism from international institutions. A sharp reaction has already come from the UN. The absence of humanitarian pauses threatens the lives of thousands of civilians. And whereas in the past such statements looked like mere formality, today they could lead to concrete steps, up to sanctions from the US and the European Union. Meanwhile, inside Israel, a new crisis is brewing. Society is increasingly discussing a question that has been postponed for decades: the mobilization of the Haredim. Ultra-Orthodox Jews have always been a special group, exempt from army service in order to preserve religious traditions. But now, when the entire country is mobilized, when every family sends sons and daughters into the army, people's patience is running out. Pressure is growing. Hundreds of families ask the authorities the same question: why are our children fighting while theirs are not? Thus, Israel finds itself in a unique situation. Externally, it faces international pressure. Internally, social pressure. The army is conducting ever wider operations: Syria, Gaza, and if necessary, Lebanon. But every military step is followed by a political and diplomatic price. This is what makes the current events not just another round of confrontation, but a potential turning point for the entire region. Israel is acting decisively, but how long can it withstand three simultaneous pressures: military, internal, and international? The events of the past day confirmed that Israel is ready to expand the scope of its operations. It all began with airstrikes. At night, while Damascus slept, sirens roared across the city and bright flashes lit up the sky. Israeli fighter jets carried out a series of pinpoint strikes on facilities that, according to Tel Aviv, were used for storing and transporting weapons. The main targets were ammunition depots, drone hangars, and a base where, it is claimed, instructors from pro-Iranian groups were located. For Israel, this is more than just an attack on a neighboring country. It is a signal to Syria, to Iran, and to all of Tehran's allies that the weapons corridor through Damascus will not be tolerated. Any attempt to transfer rockets to Lebanon or Gaza will be intercepted at the source. But the airstrikes were not enough. Under their cover, IDF special forces carried out a ground raid. According to sources, the goal was the elimination of several field commanders responsible for coordinating weapon supplies. The operation was short but symbolic. Israel was demonstrating its ability to act deep beyond its borders and to eliminate threats before they reach its territory. Meanwhile, the Gaza Strip became a separate picture of horror. The Israeli army officially declared it a combat zone. In dry military language, this means the following: No humanitarian pauses, no evacuation corridors, no guaranteed delivery of food or medicine. For civilians, it is a catastrophe. Imagine, your city is under blockade. Pharmacies are empty, hospitals cannot cope with the influx of wounded, doctors are working by flashlight because of power outages. People stand in long lines for water, while food becomes increasingly scarce. Journalistic reports from Gaza show scenes difficult to comprehend. Women with small children sleep in half-destroyed houses. The elderly cannot leave high-rises where there are no elevators or light. Young men try to reach humanitarian warehouses, but often return empty-handed. For the Israeli army, this looks like a necessary measure. Hamas and other militant groups hide among civilians, using schools and hospitals as weapons depots. But for the international community, such arguments sound less and less convincing. When images of destroyed neighborhoods and desperate people dominate the front pages, the question of the right to self-defense fades. The main issue becomes the humanitarian disaster. In this situation, the UN steps in. The Secretary General makes a sharp statement. The absence of humanitarian pauses threatens the lives of thousands. In the corridors of the Security Council, possible measures of pressure on Israel are being discussed. And if earlier such conversations remained only words, now for the first time, ideas of sanctions are being voiced. At the same time, inside Israel, another kind of pressure is growing. Social pressure. The question of mobilizing the Haredim, ultra-Orthodox Jews, has literally exploded into the political agenda. For decades, the Haredim had a special status. They were considered guardians of tradition, and for that reason the state turned a blind eye to their exemption from army service. But today, when every citizen feels the war personally, this privilege looks like blatant injustice. Hundreds of families are writing open letters to the government. On social media, videos are spreading in which mothers of soldiers say directly, "Why are our sons on the front lines while yours sit at home?" This topic is no longer marginal. It is going mainstream. Protests in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv are drawing thousands who demand equal conditions for everyone. Thus, military success, strikes on Syria, raids near Damascus, exists alongside a humanitarian failure in Gaza and growing social tension at home. Israel finds itself in a position where each battlefield victory automatically turns into a problem on another front, diplomatic or political, and this is what makes the situation especially dangerous. In Syria, the army may feel confident, but in Gaza, Israel is losing the support of the world. And at home, the government risks facing protests if the issue of mobilizing the Haredim is not addressed. If the strikes on Syria and the raid near Damascus are perceived in Israel as a military success, the situation in Gaza is provoking a wave of criticism abroad, and first and foremost, at the UN headquarters. The Secretary General of the organization delivered a tough statement. The absence of humanitarian pauses threatens the lives of tens of thousands of civilians. His speech included words rarely heard at this level directed at Israel. Inhumanity, collective punishment, a direct threat to the stability of the entire region. These formulations were instantly picked up by the global media. Headlines across newspapers and online outlets repeated the same thought. Israel has crossed the line. And although official sanctions have not yet been introduced, in the corridors of the Security Council discussions about potential pressure on Tel Aviv have begun in earnest. The United States traditionally acts as Israel's main ally, but even there, in recent months, critical voices are becoming louder. American congressmen are divided into two camps. Some demand even greater support for Israel, others insist on restrictions if the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza deepens. The White House is still maneuvering, but the risks are obvious. If Washington even partially supports sanctions, it would be a serious blow for Israel. In Europe, the situation is even tougher. Protests against Israel's actions are bringing tens of thousands onto the streets. In Berlin, Paris, and London, both migrant communities and ordinary Europeans are demanding that the bloodshed stop. Politicians are forced to react. Calls are being made to impose arms embargoes on Israel and to limit trade relations. Meanwhile, inside Israel, another kind of pressure is growing: social pressure. the question of Haredi mobilization has literally exploded into the political agenda. For decades, the Haredim enjoyed special status. They were considered guardians of tradition, and in exchange, the state ignored their exemption from military service. But today, when every citizen personally feels the war, this privilege looks like outright injustice. Hundreds of families are writing open letters to the government. On social networks, videos are spreading in which mothers of soldiers openly ask, "Why are our sons at the front while yours sit at home?" This issue is no longer marginal. It has reached the streets. Protests in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv are drawing thousands, demanding equal conditions for all. The government finds itself trapped. On the one hand, it knows that mobilizing the Haredim will provoke furious resistance from religious parties who are part of the coalition. On the other, society is no longer willing to tolerate privileges. And so we see a paradoxical picture. Israel is simultaneously facing triple pressure: international criticism and threat of sanctions from the UN, the EU, and even the US. Domestic, growing discontent among the secular population over the issue of mobilization. Media, a flood of coverage of Gaza's humanitarian crisis undermining Israel's image. Military successes, strikes on Syria and special forces raids, are drowning in a sea of political and social problems. Each bomb dropped on an arms depot near Damascus explodes another wave of diplomatic protests. Every announcement about the blockade of Gaza generates new rallies in Europe and new accusations against Israel. Inside Israel, there is a growing sense of isolation. Even the US, its main ally, increasingly hesitates before voicing support. Europe has largely shifted into the camp of critics, and within the country, division is brewing. The military demands decisiveness, society demands fairness, and politicians search for a balance that seems impossible to find. This is what makes the situation unique. Israel is winning individual battles but risks losing the war, the diplomatic and domestic one. To understand why Israel's strikes on Syria have triggered such a storm now, the picture needs to be broken down into layers. On the surface, it's just another military operation. Israel has been carrying out strikes on Syrian territory for years, and the world has almost grown accustomed to the reports. Israeli jets attacked depots near Damascus last night. But the current moment is different. First, several factors have coincided at once. The Gaza Strip is in crisis. The city has been declared a combat zone. No humanitarian pauses, no chance to at least partially ease the suffering of civilians. This sparked outrage worldwide and became the backdrop against which the strikes on Syria appear especially aggressive. Second, the targets were pro-Iranian groups. For Israel, this is a matter of principle. It cannot allow a weapons corridor to be established next door. Iranian drones and rockets, once reaching Lebanon or Gaza, instantly turn into a direct threat to Israeli cities. Therefore, the strikes on Syria are less about Syria itself and more about containing Iran. But there's a third layer. Syria has long been an arena for outside powers. Iranian structures, Russian troops, and American contingents are all present there. Every Israeli strike is not just a military episode but also a diplomatic message to multiple players. Yesterday's attack was a signal to Tehran, Moscow, and Washington all at once. We will act regardless of anyone's interests. Now, Gaza. Here the conflict takes on a completely different shade. For the Israeli army, the Gaza Strip is a nest of militants. For the international community, it is the site of a humanitarian catastrophe. And these two perspectives are almost irreconcilable. Israel says, "We are defending ourselves against terror." The UN responds, "You are destroying thousands of innocent lives." In China, the white paper revolution once showed that even silence could become a symbol of protest. In Gaza, the symbol is destruction. Every image of ruined neighborhoods works against Israel in the global media arena. And this creates a political vacuum. The military wins battles, while the diplomats lose the war. Now, let's turn to Israel's internal agenda. Mobilizing the Haredim is an issue that has been shelved for decades. The ultra-Orthodox make up about 13% of the population, but are almost absent in the army. It was seen as a compromise. You preserve tradition, we exempt you from the draft. But the current crisis is destroying that balance. When almost every family sends its children to the army, when tens of thousands of reservists are called up, the patience of secular society runs out. People demand equal conditions for all. This demand is growing louder. And if before it was voiced by small activist groups, now it has become mainstream. For the government, this threatens a coalition collapse. Religious parties will never agree to compulsory mobilization of the Haredim. Secular parties cannot explain to voters why they continue to tolerate such inequality. The result? The government is in zugzwang. Any move leads to crisis. Thus, we get a three-level picture. Military level: strikes on Syria and operations in Gaza. Israel demonstrates strength and determination. International level: a wave of criticism, talk of sanctions, protests in Europe, and tension in the US. Domestic level: societal division over Haredi mobilization, threatening to become a political crisis. All three levels are interconnected. Military success instantly becomes a diplomatic failure. Diplomatic failure increases domestic pressure. Domestic divisions undermine the ability to wage a long-term war. Therefore, Israel's strikes on Syria and the blockade of Gaza are not isolated episodes. They are part of a chain that could alter the balance of power not only in the region, but also within Israel itself. At first glance, Israel is demonstrating obvious military success. Its air force destroys weapons depots in Syria. Special forces eliminate commanders who coordinated supplies of drones and rockets. The army acts decisively, quickly, and effectively. In Gaza, despite humanitarian risks, the IDF maintains the initiative and continues to pressure Hamas. But if we look more broadly, each such victory turns into a new challenge. On the battlefield, Israel wins, but in politics and diplomacy, it falters. The UN has already issued some of its harshest statements in years. Europe is seriously discussing restrictions and sanctions. In the United States, the question of support for Israel is increasingly becoming a matter of political bargaining. And this is the main failure. A country long accustomed to unconditional support from allies suddenly finds that its actions bring not applause, but the threat of isolation. Nor does the list of problems end there. Inside Israel, social pressure is mounting. The issue of Haredi mobilization is becoming a symbol of injustice. For ordinary Israeli families, it is a matter of equality. If our children risk their lives, why do theirs enjoy privileges? For the government, it is a matter of survival. Any decision risks triggering a political crisis. Thus, Israel finds itself in a situation where three fronts merge into one: the military, where the army remains strong; the diplomatic, where its positions are weakening; the domestic, where society increasingly doubts the fairness of the state. And here, the main dilemma emerges. Israel can continue to strike Syria, blockade Gaza, and eliminate enemy commanders. But can it withstand diplomatic siege and internal division? History shows that no war is won by weapons alone. Support from allies and unity at home are also essential, and that is precisely what Israel now lacks. Today we see a paradox. A country with one of the strongest armies in the region is simultaneously more vulnerable than ever. Israel knows how to win battles, but each victory creates new political and diplomatic problems. Abroad, criticism and the threat of sanctions are growing. At home, division over Haredi mobilization is deepening. And in Gaza, every new report of humanitarian catastrophe becomes a weapon against Israel's image. And the key question now being asked by both analysts and ordinary citizens is this: can Israel maintain a balance between military power and political pressure? Or will its victories on the battlefield prove to be Pyrrhic victories, leading ultimately to defeat in diplomacy and within society itself? What do you think? Will Israel be able to keep the situation under control, or are we witnessing the beginning of a much larger crisis that could reshape the entire region? Share your opinion in the comments, leave a like, and subscribe. More explosive reports and revelations are coming soon.